Long before sanctuaries and sermons, women were forming faith in deserts and kitchens at the edges of power and promise. They prayed boldly, spoke truth, and proclaimed hope, often without invitation or approval. In this 5-week series at Sycamore Creek, you will rediscover the saints, mystics, rebels, and visionaries who are the mothers of our faith, and explore what their ancient wisdom means for our lives today. Knowing your mothers means knowing your roots and finding your voice.
I like to have fun with this. I don't know, like, it can be like drinking the mead, can be, and then you get to do it with that camera.
Okay.
Be playful or not. Or welcome to Midtown Brewing.
Thank you.
Glad you're here with me today.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing something fun, exciting. This is like a mashup of a podcast and a sermon, and you don't know anything about this other than you know the saint we're talking about today.
Right.
But that's not where we're going to start.
Okay.
So don't jump into that yet.
Okay.
All right. I've got a confession I got to start with.
Okay.
I know almost nothing about my ethnic heritage of being Irish.
Oh, that's a big deal. Yeah.
But when I wear this hat around, people are like, "Are you Irish?" And I'm like, "Well, yes, I am. I'm like Irish, English, Scottish."
Yeah.
But do you have a family member that's like really into genealogy?
My mom just got super into genealogy recently.
Okay.
Yeah, she's been doing a ton of research.
So I had a cousin who was really into genealogy long before the whole DNA, all that kind of stuff. And what he learned was that we came over from Ireland to America. All right, so my ancestor that came over from Ireland, his name was Thomas Barnabas Arthur. Mm-hmm. That's great, like, because I'm Thomas as well.
Yeah.
And in 1664, from Ireland, moved to Virginia in 1722 after near famine. And it's just before the Great Famine, like the one that everybody knows about, and the potato famine.
One of the potatoes.
Yeah, in 1740. So he moved because of like famine, but also oppression. And it took me a little bit of digging to figure this out. He was probably a Scottish Presbyterian dissenter who didn't want to be part of the Irish Anglican Church. So there was like this whole thing that you had to be part of the church to have like sort of social standing. So basically I come from Irish farmers who were seeking freedom, like a faith that's expressed through soil and scarcity in Ireland and hope for something new. And but there's like when we got to America, of course, you know this, like you and I got categorized as white, and we lost all of our ethnic heritage along the way.
Although, I mean, we are now categorized as white.
Yes.
I don't know if your ancestor Thomas Arthur was. I mean,
he would have been considered Irish.
The Irish were not considered white. They had to become white, like the Italians.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, like in this whole process of the melting pot of America, like my ethnic heritage got melted down into just being white.
Right.
And sometimes you think like, what is white culture? I get the sense you don't watch a lot of like reels or short form videos.
Sometimes.
Yeah. All right. There's this classic one I got to show you that relates to my ethnic heritage. Okay. Maybe you've seen it.
You know, and some of you say white people don't have any culture. Then what is this? I don't think you understand the heritage and athleticism it takes to be a professional, whimsical skedaddler. Is what I'm saying? Watch it.
Professional whimsical skedaddler.
Yeah.
Then, of course, did you ever go see Riverdance?
I saw like videos of it.
You saw videos of it?
Yeah.
I went to see the live.
Oh, nice.
And I cried through the whole thing.
Yeah, because it woke something up like in your DNA, in your ancestry.
Yeah, like, I didn't at the time know that I had Irish ancestry, but it was, I literally cried. Sarah thought it was so cool. Cute because like her husband, she's like just enjoying it, and I'm over here sobbing because of how beautiful it is.
That's so cool.
The whimsical skedaddlers.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about your family's ethnic heritage?
So the closest connection I have is that my grandfather did immigrate from Scotland.
Oh, okay.
To go to college in the United States. And then his parents ended up emigrating too afterwards, but he was
Okay.
17 when he came to the US. So my dad's dad. And then my dad's mom, like they are definitely like OG, like English, Irish settlers.
Okay.
Like, I mean, through my paternal grandmother's line, like there's like a farm that was built like generations back and all that stuff. And then my mom, who's been doing all the research lately on her ancestry, it's been a lot more murky because there's just a lot more like trauma, mental health, addiction,
Oh, okay.
suicide,
Wow.
adoption, all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, she's been finding like stuff about Germany, I think some Irish and British.
Yeah. So we got, I mean, a lot of us who are categorized as white were like English, Irish, Scottish, like all that mix in there. So one of the ways that I'm going to reclaim some of my Irish heritage today is by exploring an Irish saint, Saint Brigid, which you know something about Saint Brigid. Like you were excited when I invited you to do this.
Yes, I was.
Yeah. So hopefully what I'm going to do here, I'm going to maybe teach you some things that you didn't know about Brigid, because I've been like doing lots of research and exploring things.
Yeah, I'm sure you will.
But maybe you know, I mean, so in Ireland, Brigid is all over the place. There are these, like, this is just an absolutely beautiful mural. There's big murals like this on buildings of Brigid. This is by Mr. Copy. He's a mural artist. He's just done beautiful stuff. Do you know the story of her cloak?
No, I don't.
So Brigid's cloak is like really important in the whole story of who Brigid is. So what she goes to the king and asks the king for land to start a monastery, and he laughs at her. He's like, "What? I'm not going to give you just free land." And so she says, "Well, how about if you give me just the land that my cloak covers?" And the king's like, "Okay, I'll give you like 2 by 4 feet of land." And there's apparently other women with her, and they each grab a side of the cloak and they start running, and the cloak expands, like, and it just keeps expanding and expanding miraculously to the point that it's big enough for her to start a monastery on.
Yeah.
There's this really cool poem that I found by Francis Cotter called The Giving, a little bit about this. And I want to give you, will you read this for us?
Yeah. So I was given the gift of land the size of my cloak. I wanted to damn the meanness of the man. Snakes writhed and scorpions glistened in the dark caves of me. But I spread my cloak on their reptilian heads. I spread a shimmering green upon them, and the touch of the cloth calmed them, and they became lost in the plush of my green. When I opened my eyes, my cloak was on the ground, spreading and catching sunlight, spreading, and the chieftain's horse reared in fright. It spread from my feet. It spread from my feet.
Isn't that a great poem?
Yes.
I love how you added the little extra, like, to the, I wanted to damn the meanness of the man.
Well, you have to when I was reading that line.
Yeah, because Brigid, like, she, you know, like her wit and God's miraculous provision in the story provide, like overcome the king's resistance. And so the king grants her land, and it ends up that it's like the modern day monastery of Kildare, although it's not the exact same buildings anymore.
Okay.
And what we see in this story is like generosity expanding reality, and Brigid's like miracle, like there's a birth, a miracle birth that starts this whole community. And then here's something that's really interesting. The monastery is what's called, or known as, a double monastery. It's men and women.
Oh,
and Brigid, it's a double monastery.
Yeah.
Brigid exercises authority over men at Kildare, which is almost unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking about how she's connected to a goddess, you know, in like the traditional.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get there.
Yeah.
We're gonna get
and
there.
And like how, I mean, it's definitely men would have worshipped the goddess as like this ultimate being too.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's interesting.
In fact, so one of the things we're gonna like tiptoe, or like not tiptoe, but we're gonna like interweave here is there's sort of like the historical Brigid, the woman.
Right.
There's the Saint Brigid, which there's a lot of hagiography about.
Right.
You know, that term hagiography.
She has her own mythology.
Like a sort of legend and mythology around her, which may or may not be based in the way that we think about history today.
Yeah.
And then there's the goddess Brigid, who she's maybe the historical Brigid is named after, and they all kind of get mixed together in the culture of Ireland. But we're jumping ahead.
Yeah.
So
you can see where I'm excited about going.
So today we're starting this series. It's called Know Your Mothers. And it's based from a website. It's not a book. Usually we do like books, but it's really based on kind of an art-based website by Kara Quinn. And Kara Quinn is a theologian and artist. And she was a pastor for a while, but she's now doing more like gone back into the art side of things. But what we're trying to do is, like, Christianity often, like, we really remember like the men, but we don't always remember the women. In fact, the deeper I got into this, the more I was like, I didn't know this at all about Brigid or Saint Brigid, and this is my ethnic heritage.
Right.
So the story, of course, is incomplete without the mothers. You've got to have fathers and mothers, and they preached, they taught, they prophesied, they served in the earliest of times. So there's 4 mothers that we're going to be taking a look at, and these are the like different art pieces that Kara Quinn created. Saint Brigid today, Photini, Priscilla, Thecla, and then we're going to wrap up the whole series. We're going to kind of take a little bit of a U-turn because we have our Duke Intern coming. And that's going to be one of his first Sundays, so we're going to do Know Your Intern. He's not a woman or a mother. He's a single young guy named John King, but we're going to give him a Sunday to tell his story. Here's something Kara Quinn says. In fact, would you read this for us?
Those who nurtured, advocated, supported, served, prophesied, taught, and exhorted the church and the world for the liberation of all and for the mission of Christ.
So this is how she's describing like all of these mothers. And then she goes on to talk about the project as a whole. Know Your Mothers is a project that uncovers buried stories of women we all should know, with modern icons and teachings centered on the most marginalized. So she's got a whole Instagram page. You can go and it's this really beautiful, like tying the stories of these saints and mothers with the most marginalized. She goes on and says, it's my hope that these images and the stories of the women behind them would give you inspiration, help you feel seen and understood, and stir you to action for justice in your time and place, carrying on their legacies. So she's going to kind of delve into the legacies of these women and how they can continue to guide us today. Now, can you think of there's a couple mothers in Scripture, but there's one in particular that's referred to as a mother in Israel.
Mother of Israel.
Well, it should be like, I mean, this is actually not the one I'm going to talk about, but you're named after Sari, who becomes Sarah. But that's not the one I want to talk about. Deborah refers to herself as a mother.
Oh, yeah.
She says, villagers in Israel would not fight. They held back until I, Deborah, arose. Until I arose, a mother in Israel. She's like this amazing leader as a woman. What we're going to look at, and we look at these mothers, is that they arise in whatever their context is. And we see in a lot of ways faith not as a hierarchy, which is sometimes how the men end up portraying it, but rather as hospitality. And they're going to, we hope that these stories of these women will enlarge our vision of God and ourselves. So as we are wont to do, we're going to stop and give people a chance to chat about this question: what woman of faith inspires you? And bonus, if you can name one outside of your family. We're like, don't say your mom or your grandma.
Right.
Like, who's a mother, who's a woman who inspires you?
Right. And it could be like a historical person.
Historical
too.
person. Could be like somebody you worked with, a pastor you've had. A lot of us at this point have had women who are pastors. I've had several bishops who are women, and district superintendents who are women. So turn to your neighbor or put in the chat. And let's talk about it. So is there a woman of faith that inspires you?
Actually, I'm gonna say the president of the board of my nonprofit.
Oh,
Megan.
okay.
She has an amazing faith in in just like trusting life
Mm-hmm.
and trusting that she can be true to herself and that the divine will like work through her and flow through her. I feel like I've learned a lot from
Mm-hmm.
her. And you know, and she comes from a different, just from a unique and different kind of spiritual grounding.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been really beautiful
Yeah.
to see how she can teach me about trusting God and trusting God to like live and move in me in exactly the way that's needed, like with my full pleasure and aliveness, like as a woman.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I was trying to get her to be a co-host, and the schedule just didn't work out.
Yeah.
But she and I are getting together for coffee sometime. To get to know
yeah,
each
I mean
other
the theme
and
was perfect
share
for
some
her,
stories.
but yeah,
Yeah.
I'm bringing her in anyway a little bit
Okay.
here.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna go back to Ireland and St.
Okay.
Brigid and my ethnic heritage, which is some of your ethnic heritage too. Do you know anything about what was really unique about Ireland religiously in the history of the West?
You mean like before Christianity came, or?
Well, both.
I mean, I know that there's a super rich tradition of like their what I would call indigenous like land-based spiritual practices.
Yeah.
And then kind of how that got woven,
Like Celtic religions
like
and
Celtic
Druids
religion,
and so on.
right?
Yeah.
And like just
Yeah.
a sense of like kind of power in sacred places, and
Yeah.
it was very, very developed and then got like woven into Christianity. I think that's why we still know about it.
Yeah.
That's what I know.
So yeah, you're kind of hitting a little bit on this. Ireland is unique in all of Europe because it was never conquered by Rome. And in that respect, its Christianity was monastic rather than episcopal. So it was like communal based rather than hierarchy based. There was never a violent suppression of paganism in Ireland.
Right.
And I don't know, paganism is a weird word. I've always understood it as like there's two kinds of people in the world. There's Christians and pagans. So it's like just a way of like saying Jews and Gentiles, Christians and non-Christians.
Right.
But the indigenous religion was never violently suppressed because Rome never conquered Ireland.
Yeah.
It tended to be literary and oral. And so Celtic religion and Christianity intertwined in a way that both of them ended up being changed in the process. And it kind of provides a way of thinking about how, or a model for how Christian faith doesn't have to destroy cultural identity.
Yeah.
There's something else that can happen. And one of the unique things is there becomes space for the feminine spiritual authority. And you had druidesses in Ireland. And in Brigid, you have the Christian faith incarnated into this religious culture. So let's just be clear who Brigid, like, again, we're talking about like there's three kinds of Brigids here. There's maybe like the historical person, there's the saint, and then there's the goddess Brigid. So the Brigid we're going to talk about today isn't really the goddess Brigid. She's not actually really like a Christian woman, the way that we think about that. What she is she's Irish Christian, which is a different kind of thing than the way that we think about it, at least as I've been exploring it. So,
well, yeah, and I think that what you said about how Christian faith doesn't have to like destroy cultural identity, I think that maybe part of what we see in Ireland is that it goes even further than that. It doesn't have to destroy like the spiritual belief system and way of relating to the world, even what we would call religious identity either. Like those, like it doesn't have to cancel out. And so the separation between Brigid the saint and Brigid the goddess maybe doesn't even have to be so distinct. They can kind of flow in together and in their
we're gonna get there.
mythologies.
We're gonna get there.
I just keep wanting to get at you.
Yeah. Well, you got to, when you're telling a story, you got to lay your cards down a little bit at a time. But Brigid's feast day aligns with Imbolc, which you probably know more about Imbolc.
Yes, I celebrate Imbolc every year.
Tell us, what is Imbolc?
So it's the beginning of spring in like Celtic, indigenous spirituality. it's the cross quarter day between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. And so for them, it's actually when spring starts. And it makes sense ecologically, and at least in that region of the world, February, well, it's kind of set as February 2nd because it lines up, the church likes to line it up with the Roman calendar, but traditionally it might have been more of a lunar calendar, so it would shift dates. But it's, when like just barely like the sap's starting to flow, the ground's starting to thaw, like, and the ewes have their lambs in the belly. So imbulk means in the belly, and it's like referring to the lambs in the belly of the ewes. And so it's kind of about like what's growing, the seeds that are like, you can't see them yet. It's in the dark, but they're growing.
I think most Western white American Christians don't think of the season or the year in that way.
The wheel of the year.
Yeah, the wheel of the year, which we got a picture of it here on the screen. You can see embolic in the top right corner there.
Yeah.
But this is the way that the culture in that moment understood it. And Brigid, the goddess, is the goddess of fire and fertility, which again, you've got the ewes that are starting to lactate and the lambs. She's the protector of homes, protector of mothers, protector of animals. And I think one of the ways, again, scholars kind of disagree on how to talk about this, but you essentially have Christianity baptizing all of this stuff, and this baptizing this myth, legend of the goddess Brigid, instead of erasing it. And you have these two things then beginning to become intertwined. Now, again, historians are going to debate about like who amplified who. Does the saint amplify the goddess? Does the goddess amplify the saint? But the cultural result in Ireland was a synthesis of both of those traditions, both the goddess and the historical person who became the saint. So the way it kind of gets baptized sometimes is the fire of the goddess Brigid becomes the Holy Spirit's flame. Fertility becomes the fruitfulness of generosity and mercy. Healing becomes compassion. Poetry becomes prayer. Or you could say faith in Ireland didn't erase the old sacred world, it sanctified it. And now we're going to get into a word that you really like. It's the word syncretism. What's syncretism?
It's like the mixing, the blending. Some would even say picking and choosing of different aspects of different religions and like kind of mashing them together and like lived practice as well as beliefs. And it happens all the time. Yeah.
I think there's a way that we blend. You and I have had this conversation. I blend pop culture with Christianity all of the time.
Right.
In fact, I think maybe we could go deeper in a theological word and talk about it as incarnation. It's a way that if the incarnation took place in Ireland, if the Son of God, second person of the Trinity, came to Ireland, there would probably be this way that the culture didn't get erased, it got incarnated. And in some ways you could think about that even in Brigid herself as an incarnation of that.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to think about how it like the Christ presence was already there. Before whatever like framework and belief system and Christian religious people ever got to Ireland. And I had this experience in Bolivia because I was a missionary and anthropological researcher in Bolivia, and one thing that they would talk to me about there is how they believed, and Bolivia is a mostly indigenous country. It's like one of the few Latin American countries that's majority indigenous, and it's very, there's a lot of, syncretic elements in their practice of even, obviously Catholicism, but even evangelical, like Protestant Christianity. And they would talk about how Christ was already here, and they would like show me this chacana. It's like this, this indigenous cross that they would make that was kind of more similar, like equal lines, like what's on my necklace, rather than like the longer, vertical line. And they would see like, look, we already had a cross and Christ was already here. And of course they didn't, like, it wasn't like they had language that was similar to, or like belief structure similar to Christianity, but the way that they like interpreted that syncretism is Christ was already here.
Yeah. They didn't have Greek philosophy as the language for talking
Right,
about.
but that's
like,
the point. It was
Trinity.
Greek philosophy.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like Jesus or, you know, the Abrahamic God or anything. So
there's a bunch of ways then that this gets incarnated in, like, really embodied in Brigid. And one of them is through beer. Of course, it's Ireland, right? Like, so cheers.
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
Salud.
There's a feast day at Kildare, the story goes, and they ran out of beer. And and Brigid fills barrels with water. This should start sounding familiar, right? Like, and water wasn't safe to drink at that time. Like, it was just not the way that we have purified water today.
Yeah.
But something that was fermented was safer to drink.
Right.
And so she turns these barrels of water into beer, which
And the party keeps going.
yeah, exactly. Like, so, I mean, she's a messianic figure in this moment.
Right.
Is that Jesus incarnated. And there's a poem that's written about this. Again, like prayer becomes poetry. So this is like all over Irish art. You want to read this poem for us?
Sure. Oh, and it has the Brigid cross on it too.
Yeah.
I'd like to give a lake of beer to God. I'd love the heavenly host to be tippling there for all eternity. I'd sit with the men, the women of God there by the lake of beer. We'd be drinking good health forever, and every drop would be a prayer.
This is not Puritan America.
No, not at all.
This is like a rich, embodied, like, Irish culture. Like, it didn't have to erase the things. Now, there's a whole bunch of them. I feel like we could go into them, but there's also a Brigid miracle about butter. During Lent, she had given all of the butter away to the poor, and the dairymaids panicked because they had nothing left for her father's household. And she prayed over the empty churns, and the butter returned threefold. So she is the patron saint of butter.
That's so beautiful, because I mean, butter is like, it's the fat, it's the pleasure, it's that extra that buttery flavor that, you know.
I mean, everything's better with butter.
Yeah, exactly. And it's very embodied. It's very sensual. It's very like, this is about enjoying the body.
Yeah. It's not modern health, like influencer culture. Don't eat the butter.
Right.
Brigid's like, okay. So then there's a cow miracle as well in the stories of Brigid. A poor woman comes to Brigid. Her cow had died, and she had nothing left to feed her children. And Brigid prayed, and the cow was restored to life, full of milk. So it didn't just like come back. It had all kinds of milk. In another story, one person's cow's milk filled the pails of an entire community. So it was like this abundance of food. And so in early Ireland, like, holiness wasn't just this thing that happened in these cathedrals or these sacred spaces. It happened in everyday lifeness, in the butter, in the creameries, in the dairy. They happen where people work and eat and where they share life. God's power then is shown in a domestic space rather than just in these dramatic, holy places. Or you could say that Brigid's miracles are the economy of heaven incarnated into butter and beer.
That abundance.
Yeah.
Of, you know, and we would talk about spiritual abundance. I mean, like when you're talking about how, Brigid, the goddess, kind of was baptized and then transformed all these things into more sanctified versions. But then, like, what if the OG version, the actual butter and beer, the actual fertility and the actual fire are also just as sacred?
Yeah. You could also say Brigid's miracles turn scarcity into sufficiency and sufficiency into surplus. There's always this surplus, especially when it comes to the poor. Or you could say her miracles are embolic in miniature. So they're the first stirrings of life in a frozen world. So Brigid helps us reclaim a kind of rooted faith that's earthy, that's generous, that's communal, that's feminine. And I'm reclaiming some of this. Like, food has always been really important to me.
Yeah.
You and I've talked about that. You really like cooking.
It is to
I
me
love
too.
cooking.
Yeah.
Like, and food and drink. I love like having people over and having cooked a great meal for them. There's something very Irish about that that I am kind of reclaiming as not something separate from my spirituality, but as something central to it. And you do that a lot. Like you already, like you're creating a whole faith community around food and cooking and the healing feast. So of course there's a lot of myth, there's a lot of legend, there's a lot of hagiography that has built up around Brigid. But really what that does is it tells us about Irish culture and Irish Christianity, which is a little different than the way that we think about Christianity here in America. I think as I've dug into Brigid, I'm realizing like this is part of like my own reclaiming of my ethnic heritage, but also my spiritual heritage in a kind of synchronistic-ish way to let those cultural expressions be part of who I am at the core. Yeah. All right, I got one more really important story about Brigid. And this is a really key one for today's culture. She's the daughter of a chieftain and a slave. So she has mixed lineage of being a slave daughter and a chieftain's daughter. What she ends up doing, though, with her chieftain dad is she ends up continuing to give stuff away to the poor. She keeps giving her dad's wealth away to the poor. And a little bit of a Robin Hood gets thing. Really upset about this. And in a patriarchal culture, he takes her to the king, and she's like a little girl at this point. She's like 11 or 12. And he's going to basically sell her to the king off in slavery. And so here she is. She comes, they're on their way to the king, and Brigid does another one of these moments where she gives her father's bejeweled sword to a beggar. And her chieftain father is like incensed. But the king looks at
I love that he can't do anything about it in this story. Like it's perfect. Like, okay. Like
well, what did you do? You know, I don't know. Maybe she gave it and the person ran away. Who knows?
Yeah, or it's just like the force of her generosity.
But the king looks at it and he's like, wait, hold on. She's a more faithful Christian than you or I. And she basically, the king frees Brigid from both her father and from like what her father was getting ready to do. In fact, the king witnesses it and says, she pleases God more than you or me. Her generosity, it costs her family something valuable, but it wins her freedom. And so there's this whole history of her being known as a peacemaker between rival tribes in Ireland. The early biographies tell us repeatedly that Brigid was known as a peacemaker who intervened in disputes between rival factions. 5th century Ireland's fragmented by numerous tuatha. That's like the name of the way they talk about tribes. All these tuatha. These are small kingdoms, small clans, and they frequently feuded over raids and cattle and land, territorial boundaries, honor disputes, and it positions, like the stories position Brigid as somebody who brings peace between these warring factions. And so there's this whole history of spirituality come up around peace with Brigid.
Which is so relevant, like for Ireland's more recent history and all the warring factions. There's there's continued struggle with that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's this movement that has come up on St. Brigid's Day, which is February 1st, a pause for peace. At noon on February 1st, take a moment and pause for peace. And I actually have gone and put this in my calendar to observe on February 1st at noon every year, to pause for peace in honor of St. Brigid and practicing her peacemaking.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to stop for a minute. We gave people a whole bunch of stories about Brigid. I don't know if we'll be able to keep all of them in the actual video, but when have you seen someone give away something valuable for love? That's the question. So turn to your neighbor or write it in the comments. When have you seen someone give away something valuable for love? Let's talk about it. All right, so you haven't thought of something that somebody gave away for love, but you said you had all kinds of things that are coming to mind. So this is your chance before we wrap this whole thing up. What's coming to mind for you?
I'm just thinking a lot about how that cultural identity that, has been erased by whiteness. The project of whiteness, of like having this superior group that can oppress others, basically, and like having it has to be homogeneous, and it's disconnected from specific, place and land and traditions, and like those like kind of those kind of healthy cultures. And I'm thinking about how reconnecting with like your Irish heritage and with Brigid, it's like showing all of these ways that Christianity in its essence can be non-hierarchical and communal and embodied and, like sensual and fleshy and all these things that are usually associated with the feminine and with women and, the fertility and all these things. And I'm just thinking about how, like, I think the two things go hand in hand, like deconstructing some of these hierarchical and patriarchal ways of thinking about God also goes hand in hand with like recovering our cultural roots as well, any ethnic group, any like racial identity, but especially as white people or people that, have been categorized as white. And how recovering those roots, it recovers our connection to being indigenous people. We were all indigenous people. Yeah. Indigenous people, it's really just about being connected to a certain ecological like context and place and like senses of place, and like those stone circles that you showed me in Ireland, and to the certain stream and to the to the land and to like your relationship with all of the creatures and the land and the waters. Yeah. And so it's like reconnecting us with ultimately that syncretism that we're also descended from these indigenous spiritual traditions.
There's a generosity of symbols, generosity of experiences, a generosity of the way that it's embodied or characterized or practiced that opens up when we crack open that kind of project of whiteness, as you say, to reclaim something about where we're from. Yeah. And where we're from gives us new treasures to unpack.
Yeah, and new ways of being, like that are more relational and less hierarchical.
So Jesus, we got to get Jesus in here somewhere. So
hey,
I saved him for the end.
Come on in.
Like we loaded the bases. Now Jesus can knock the grand slam in.
He's been hanging out this whole time.
Yeah. All right. So this is Jesus in Luke 6, which is sometimes the like Sermon on the Plain as compared to the Sermon on the Mount. And he says, "Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you give will be the measure you get back." I mean, there's this really earthiness about the way that he talks about this. Yeah. And a
like
generosity.
Harvest or baking.
Yeah. And I found a poetic way, or I didn't find the author of it, like who exactly to attribute it to, but I found a poetic translation, or it's not paraphrase of this. I'm going to have you read it.
"Give, and the river gives back. Pour out, and you will be poured into. A measure pressed down, shaken together, running over. The lap of grace has no edges, only overflow. You receive by releasing. You fill by emptying. You live by giving away."
I think that's just so beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
All right, so we're gonna go back. You kind of like hinted at this. If you look real close at this icon that Kara Quinn has created, if you look in the background, you'll see the Brigid cross, right? Yep. All right, so I brought a special treat for you and for me today.
Is it chocolate? I'm sorry. I am excited about it. I know it's not chocolate. I'm excited.
All right, we just went right to chocolate. Like,
I mean, I was getting into like the embodied, sensual, the butter, you know, I was really.
Yeah, I brought you some butter. We're just gonna eat out of.
The ironic thing is that I'm allergic to dairy. I can't have butter,
okay.
but I know how good it is. I've had it.
Yeah. So no, I brought some reeds from my my yard.
Okay.
And I saw if we could do. Usually, you make Brigid crosses.
Yeah.
With live reeds. These are dead, so you can make Brigid crosses, and these are like ones that you can buy that are much nicer looking than the ones we're going to make. But there's of course a lot of symbolism and history that has been, people hang these in their protection or butter or fertility or all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But I'm going to add something to it, because the way that you make this is a reed goes in. So you give the reed in. I'm adding a layer of meaning to this.
Yeah.
And then the reed bends around and it comes back out.
Yeah.
So
it's
you
that flow
give,
of abundance.
and it comes back
You give
to you.
and it flows
All
out
right.
and you get.
Yeah. So you ready to make a Brigid cross with me?
Yes.
That's
is
what
a
we're
treat.
going to do. All right. It's not chocolate. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. This is actually better.
Next time I'll have
I've never
chocolate
made a Brigid
with a
cross.
Brigid cross. All right. All right. So here's how this goes, based on YouTube videos.
Okay.
Is you start with one long one,
Mm-hmm.
and then I found it easiest to bend it first,
Okay. So.
and then it goes around the middle.
Okay.
And then you turn it, or no, you go this way, turn it to the right.
But I'm not putting it all the way. Wait, let me see. Okay.
So turn it to the right,
Mm-hmm.
and then you take the next one, and you go up.
Okay.
So you're always going up with it.
I'm always going to this side, like
Yeah,
on
you're
my
just
left
rotating
hand.
it the same way each time,
Okay.
and then adding the next one. No, you can see like
Yeah.
how nicely those are made.
Okay, but I think I'm getting it. Yeah, I mean, this is a memory. We're making memories right now.
And then eventually, it will hold all together, especially when you start to put this, like tie the strings around the ends. I practiced all this at home first. So once you get however many you want, then you're gonna take a piece of string.
Okay. I mean, we might have to use all these up just since they're here.
Okay, well you do that. At the end. It's your artist prerogative. And then when you get to wherever you want to stop, you're gonna wrap the string around it. Look at you making it all.
I don't even know what I'm doing.
There we go. I feel like this is like this was Pinterest.
Yeah.
And this was.
It's not bad though. It definitely
when
the thing.
when you cut the strings off, you end up. I mean, this looks decent. I think.
Exactly.
Oh wow, yours is looking. That's looking pretty good.
Yeah, it got some weird stuff going on with this one, but it's.
I mean, that's
okay.
okay.
It's okay. It's my first one.
Yeah, your first Brigid cross.
All right, we did it. I'm proud of us.
They're kind of Frankensteinian. There we go.
Yay!
That's a wrap.